You do not wake to noise, not really. There is no sharp bell, no servant's knock, no clang of the public hour striking across marble. Rome, even in her busiest heart, wakes slowly. And so do you. You stir, not all at once, but in pieces, first a breath, slow and shallow, testing the weight of the air. Then the eyes, which open not because they must, but because the darkness inside the lids begins to feel heavier than whatever lies beyond them. You don't sit up, not yet. Your back remains pressed against the slight rise of the cot, your head cradled by the same flattened wool bundle that is softened not with age, but with routine. You let your eyes drift upward toward the ceiling beams, thick with soot and time, carved more by smoke than by tools. There's a quiet in this room, the kind that speaks in textures. You do not hear silence, not as silence, but as a series of almost sounds, the soft tick of cooling wood from the shutter hinge, the distant murmur of two carts grinding past each other in the narrow alley below, the faint, rhythmic shuffle of a broom on the stone floor of the tannery shop beneath your room. A sound so constant it has ceased to mean anything but morning. And somewhere beneath all of that, dust. You feel it first in your nose, dry and papery, then the back of your throat, then under your fingertips as you reach across the bedding to fold the linen sheet back from your body. It resists, clings slightly to your knees, like it, too, is reluctant to release you into the day. You rise slowly, not from laziness, but from reverence, as if the act of standing is a rite that must be approached with the kind of care normally reserved for prayer. Your feet touch the floor, stone, uneven, cool, etched in places by sandals not your own. You don't wince. The cold is part of it. It always is. The basin is already filled. You filled it last night, as always, before the light left the window slit for good. It sits now in its place beside the shuttered wall, a wide clay bowl set upon a flat brick, the rim faintly chipped, the glaze cracked in a line like a riverbed in drought. The water within it has settled overnight. A thin skin has formed atop it, not film, not oil, but the quiet tension of time left undisturbed. You break it gently with your fingers, and it sighs back in emotion. This is not bathing. This is not what the public houses offer. Not steam, not marble, not heat thick with the scent of resin and lavender oil. This is the washing before the washing, the private act, the part that matters not because it makes you clean, but because it reminds you that your body is still your own. You scoop a handful of water and bring it to your face. The cold bites softly, spreading across your cheeks, into the corners of your eyes, down to your neck. You do not gasp. You've done this too many mornings for surprise. You rub slowly, methodically, as if retracing the lines of your face in case you've forgotten them. The water trickles down your collarbone, settles into the linen waistband of your sleeping tunic, and disappears. You dry your hands on the same cloth you used yesterday. Rough wool, gray-brown, a permanent smell of old soap and skin. You keep it hanging from the edge of the cot, folded not for neatness, but for rhythm, so that each morning it is where it should be. You press it to your face. It does not absorb fully. It never does. Next comes the oil. You unstopper the flask, long-necked, sealed with wax that flakes now when you touch it. Inside, oil thick and dark, with the smell of something green still trapped inside it. Not perfume, not luxury, just pressed olives and thyme. You pour a little into your palm, no more than a spoon's worth, and hold it there a moment, warming it. Then, slowly, you spread it over your skin. First the forearms, then the shoulders, then across the ribs, the thighs, the neck. You do not anoint yourself. You do not coat. You massage. You remember. The oil sinks into yesterday's dust, lifts the tired breath of the tannery smoke, softens the places where sleep pressed the flesh into odd shapes. Your body begins to smell faintly of earth, of something between food and memory. Only now do you reach for the strigil. Bronze, curved, cold against the wrist. A simple tool that carries with it the weight of hundreds of mornings. You run it slowly down the length of your arm, scraping, not harshly, but with pressure. The oil comes away dark, streaked with what the night left behind. Sweat, dirt, the invisible residue of living. You wipe the blade clean on the cloth. Again, stroke by stroke. Again, you work downward toward the belly, toward the knees. Always in long downward arcs, as if encouraging the body to let go of its own heaviness. You do not rush, because this is the moment the body begins to return to itself. You sit on the edge of the cot when it is finished. The room smells different now, not fresh, but intentional. The air has been stirred, the dust unsettled. The scent of olive oil lingers beneath your fingernails. The strigil rests once again on its hook, slightly warmer now from your hand. The basin is still half full. The surface ripples where your fingers touched it. And you're not clean, not in the public sense. But you are closer. Your tunic waits on the stool. Folded yesterday, just before dusk. Linen, coarse, sun-bleached into a sort of tired white. You shake it out. The fabric resists, then yields. It always does. You pull it over your head, and it drapes not like cloth, but like routine. The weight of it is not heavy, but it is present. You tie the belt. You press your palm to your chest. You exhale. You are ready. Outside, Rome has begun in earnest. The alley below your room is full of the morning's inventory. Carts loaded with amphorae, sacks of grain, figs still green in their baskets. The street seller at the corner has begun shouting about olives, though his voice is more cracked than persuasive. Somewhere, someone is already arguing about coin. Somewhere else, a woman drops a jug. The sound of clay breaking echoes like a curse. You join the city not as one newly born, not as one scrubbed bright and shining, but as one aligned with the dust, with the oil, with the rhythm. Later, in the 10th hour, perhaps, there will be the bathhouse, the real washing, the social washing, the hot washing. You will sweat there. You will be scraped again. You will be among others. There will be voices and bodies and borrow cloths. But that is for later. This basin, this oil, this quiet hour between the waking and the speaking, this is yours. This is the part no one sees. This is the part that matters most. You do not walk to the bathhouse quickly. No one does. Even those who speak loudly in the forums, who gesture with bread in one hand and garlic in the other, who argue prices until their cheeks burn. Even they, as they near the domed building with its patient stone walls and thin line of steam rising like memory from the cracks, begin to slow, as if the air changes here, as if the very ground has been taught to hush. You carry nothing with you but a folded cloth, a small flask of oil, and a worn strigil in a leather loop at your hip. These are not tools. Not really. They are reminders. They say, I know the way. They say, I have done this before, and I will do it again. The bathhouse does not call to you. It does not shine or sing or persuade. It waits. Its door is open, as always. And though it is wide, and though many pass through it each hour, still, each time you approach, something in you pauses. Not from fear, from ritual, from the knowledge that you are about to pass from one world to another, from the world of noise and heat and dust and meat and coin, into something else, something wetter, Slower. Older. You step inside. At first, nothing happens. The air shifts, yes. It thickens a little. The noise of the street dies behind you, but the light remains the same. Dust glows in the slanted shafts through the high windows. The tile beneath your feet, stone, red and white, smooth from centuries, is cool and dry. You walk along it without sound, your sandals brushing against your ankles with a hush that feels learned. The apoditerium greets you not like a room, but like a memory. It is the changing place, the space between what you carry and what you are. Benches line the walls. Hooks, worn smooth, lean out from pillars like arms grown tired. No one looks at you. Not directly. Everyone is busy with the work of undoing. You do the same. You do not rush. You do not struggle with knots. You fold your tunic the way you fold breadcloth, softly, in thirds. You place it on the bench beside your sandals. You keep your flask and your strigil. You carry them now not like tools, but like keys. You are not naked. Not truly. You are open. Your feet touch the warm tile as you walk deeper. The frigidarium comes first. Cold, still simple. The pool in the center is shadowed, its water barely moving. A man sits at its edge, feet in, shoulders hunched, steam from another room trailing across his back like a forgotten robe. He does not look up. You do not enter the pool. Not today. You pass through. The next room holds heat, but not yet steam. The tepidarium. Warm walls. Floors that remember fire. A brazier burns behind a grate in the corner. Not fiercely, but steadily like breath. You feel it first in your toes, then in the joints of your fingers, then in your neck. The muscles begin to loosen, not from motion, but from attention. There are others here. Not many. 3, perhaps 4. They sit or recline on benches built into the wall, their skin glazed in oil, their eyes half-lidded, like cats in the sun. One speaks. His voice is low, but not secretive. A kind of hum, meant more to keep silence company than to break it. You sit. You place your strigil beside you. You open your flask. The oil this time is warmer. It has been nestled against your body since morning, and now it pours slowly, thick as honey, onto your palms. You rub it over your arms, your chest, the curve of your stomach. You press it into your legs, into the arches of your feet. You feel yourself return. Someone exhales beside you. You do not turn. The oil smells faintly of citrus today, or maybe of resin, something from a tree that still remembers wind. You close your eyes and press your thumbs into your shoulders. Not to fix anything, just to listen. Time moves differently here. Not forward, not in circles. It pulls. It rests. Eventually, you rise. You take your strigil. You follow the tile line that curves toward the caldarium, the hot room, the real heat, the place where sweat is not a symptom, but the goal. And the door? The door is wood, heavy, swollen from years of moisture. You press it open with your shoulder. The steam meets you like a question. Not all at once. Not violently. It raps. It studies. It finds the curve of your ear, the line of your spine, the inside of your elbow. It asks, what will you leave behind today? The air is dense. You step inside, and the door closes behind you. The room is domed. The light comes from above, a round hole in the roof where sky sometimes peers in. Today, only whiteness. The steam dances in columns. You do not walk quickly. No one does. You take each step like it matters. Because it does. The heat rises from the floor. Your feet feel it first, not as burn, but as weight. Each tile holds a story of ash, of fire, of water poured by unseen hands into channels below. You hear it, the hiss, the sigh, the living breath of a furnace too old to speak but too loyal to stop. You sit on the stone ledge. You wait. You let the heat find you. And slowly it does. It pulls the oil from your skin. It loosens the night from your shoulders. It softens your thoughts. You close your eyes. You do not sleep, but you leave. For a while. When you open them, the steam is thicker. You take your strigil. You begin to scrape. Not quickly, not harshly, but with purpose. Oil, sweat, dust, the weight of the morning. The weight of walking through a city that forgets nothing. You draw it down your arm. Wipe on a cloth. Again. Again. You are not erasing. You are becoming. Others do the same. No one speaks. Not because silence is required, but because it is deserved. The sound here is not voices. It is dripping. It is the soft clang of metal on stone. It is the body remembered. You rise. The door out is heavier now. Steam clings to your shoulders as you pass back through the tepidarium, then the frigidarium. The cold shocks you, not like punishment, but like truth. You do not flinch. You step into the water. It grips you, and then it releases. Your breath catches, then evens. You do not linger. You step out. You dry slowly. The cloth is rough, but you welcome it. It reminds you what texture is, what touch is, what means to be wrapped again. You return to the apoditerium. Your tunic is folded, just as you left it. You dress with care, not out of pride, out of rhythm, out of return. You step outside. The sun is higher now. The dust on the road sparkles faintly. Rome has not changed, but you have, and the body you carry through the street is not clean, not exactly. It is ready. You notice it before you step outside, before your hand touches the warm iron of the door latch, before the air changes, before the dust reasserts itself across the top of your sandals, before your skin, still quiet from the bath, begins to reawaken beneath the linen. You notice it in your breath. There is something in it, not bitter, not sharp, but unmistakable. A sourness that wasn't there inside. The moment you inhale near the threshold, you feel it like a fingertip tapping lightly just behind the eyes. Not foul, not yet, just there. It is the scent of the street, not the street as a concept. Not Rome, the city of marble and arches and debate, but the street as body, as living surface, as ancient, breathing creature stitched together from 10,000 mornings like this one. The street is always awake. Even when the men are sleeping and the goats are tethered and the shutters are drawn, the street continues, stewing, fermenting, collecting. And now, in the glare of midday, it exhales. And it exhales onto you. You step outside. The sun is high, not yet angry, but no longer gentle. It rests above the buildings with a kind of casual cruelty, flattening their shadows, heating their clay facades until they seem to hum beneath the pressure. The stones beneath your feet, the same stones you walked across an hour ago, on your way to the baths, are warmer now. Not hot, but aware. They remember. And so do you. Your skin, still soft from the oil, is beginning to dry. The linen tunic clings to your spine in a narrow column of sweat. It is not discomfort. Not yet. It is simply the start of forgetting. The forgetting of the bath. The forgetting of the silence. The forgetting of the moment when your body was only yours. Now it is part of the street again. And the street has its rules. You walk slowly, not because you are tired, though perhaps you are, but because everything around you asks to be absorbed. The woman at the fountain scrubbing a child's tunic against a flat stone. The mule swishing its tail in rhythm with the wind. The two men spitting olive pits into the dust between sentences. The low, low sound of water somewhere nearby, moving through a pipe older than anyone alive, moving because it must. And the smells, always the smells. They rise in layers. They peel themselves off the walls, the carts, the hair of passing men. Sweat, of course, that is the bass note. Human, fermented, relentless. But also fish dried and salted and carried in woven baskets. And oil, not the perfumed kind, not the kind pressed for healing or for worship, but the thick kitchen oil that coats everything in a layer of hunger. And piss, not hidden, not shameful, simply present. It clings to alleyways like ivy. The mixture does not offend you, because you live inside it, because you were born into it, and because you know instinctively how to read it. The body knows before the mind does, knows when to cross the street, knows which corner to avoid, knows when a scent belongs to morning labor and when it belongs to something left too long in the sun. You are not disgusted. You are aware. And awareness is power. That is what they say in the Subura. Anyway, the lower district, the crowded place, the place of no aqueducts and too many feet. Here, the smell is not background. It is identity. A man who smells of soap is a visitor. A woman whose tunic smells faintly of lavender has a patron. A child who smells of nothing is dying. You pass them all. You pass the man at the corner with a bucket, a wooden thing, square, reinforced with rusted iron bands, filled to the top with water the color of weak tea. He is not a washer. He is a sprinkler. That is his job, to walk the main streets with a handful of laurel branches and sprinkle the dust so it does not rise when the senator's litter passes. He is paid in bread. He does not smile. He dips the branches, flicks them in wide arcs across the stones, watches the dry earth hiss and settle, and moves on. You watch the droplets catch the sun. For a moment, they look like silver. Then they fall. Then they vanish. You keep walking. Ahead, the latrine. Public. Communal. Open to the street, though half shaded by a canvas that sags in the middle from yesterday's rain. It is not hidden. It is not mocked. It simply is. A place where smells become declarations. There are no walls. Only a curved bench of stone with openings spaced precisely apart. Beneath it, water moving slowly, darkly. A wooden stick with a sponge rests in a trough nearby, half submerged. You know the system. Everyone does. You know to wash the sponge in the gutter channel when you're finished. You know not to touch your face afterward. You do not go in today. You keep walking. Your body is beginning to itch. Just beneath the belt line, where the oil has mixed with sweat and begun to collect in a ring of discomfort, you shift the tunic. It does not help. You glance around. You're not alone in this. Everyone is adjusting, scratching, tugging. Rome is always just a little too warm, too close, too full of itself. And that is why the bathhouses matter. Not for the water, not even for the steam, for the contrast. You remember now why the oil felt like a shield, why the scraping of the strigil felt like prayer, why you did not speak. Because this world of scent and sound and heat and presence, this is the default. The body forgets the bath as soon as it leaves it, but it remembers the street forever. You pass a boy selling perfumes, tiny bottles on a wooden tray slung around his neck. He does not shout. He whispers, a different kind of selling, not for need, for longing. You do not stop, but you watch him move. The way he angles the tray toward the sun so the oils glow. The way he sniffs each bottle before offering it, as if checking to make sure the dream is still intact. You remember being 17. You remember saving enough for one vial of imported scent. You remember spilling half of it before you reached home. The memory does not hurt, but it rests. As you walk further, The street narrows. Shadows stretch across the tile. The heat softens. You pass beneath a fabric awning hung between two buildings. Beneath it, a man shaving another man's face with a blade the length of your thumb. The shaved man sits with his eyes closed, mouth slightly open, head tilted back. Trusting, the barber works slowly, carefully. The lather is not thick. It is made from ash and crushed beans. It smells faintly of bitterness. You pause to watch, not out of interest, but because stillness feels earned. Then, without thinking, you reach up and run your fingers along your own jaw. You feel the new stubble. You feel the day returning to you. You're almost home. The shop below your room smells of tanning, of skin boiled and stretched and cured and beaten. The scent wraps itself around the staircase, climbs with you. You do not mind. You have lived above this smell for years. It is the scent of work, of leather, of trade. It reminds you that cleanliness is not always fragrant. You enter your room. The basin is empty. The oil flasks stand where you left it, still uncorked. A fly circles it. You swat lazily. Miss. You sit. You remove the tunic. You press your palm to your chest. And you exhale. The bath is gone, but the memory of water, the way it lifted the weight from your skin, the way it allowed your breath to deepen, the way it carved a silence into your bones, that remains. You lie back on a cot. The pillow is warm now. The city murmurs outside. And you, for this moment, belong to both. You do not begin this day. This day begins around you. Before your eyes open, the room is already alive, but softly, as if not to intrude. The brazier has been lit, though no flame shows, only the heat that hums beneath its lid. You smell it first, not as fire, but as warmth, a scent of singed wood and faint oil, as though the walls have just exhaled after holding their breath through the night. Somewhere, faint and far from your bed, water is moving. Not in a river, not in a bath, but in a pot. Heated, poured, paused. You are not alone. You have not been alone for hours. Your body knows it, feels the nearness of footsteps that do not echo, of cloth rustling against stone, of eyes that do not seek permission to observe. You remain still, not out of sleep, but out of surrender. There is no reason to move until they ask you to, and they will not ask aloud. You open your eyes slowly, not because you are tired, but because slowness is permitted here. Expected, required. The ceiling is high, painted long ago. What remains is only color. No form, no story, just the soft blues and faded golds of what might have once been sky, or stars, or both. You stare for a moment. You forget what day it is. Then you remember. The basin will already be warm. A voice, low, female, not young, says only one word. Ready. You do not nod. You do not speak. You sit. The robe is already unfastened. She undid it while you still dreamed. You do not feel shame. There is none here. Your body is not yours, not entirely. Not in this moment. It belongs to the process. She helps you stand. The floor is tiled in dark stone, warm from the fire below. Your feet recognize each square. You have stepped on them for years. They remember the weight of you, heavier in winter, lighter in illness. Today, your heels press down slowly, evenly. You are steady. A second servant appears, younger, silent. He carries a pitcher. Steam curls from its mouth like a thought, just leaving the tongue. He pours it into the shallow basin with a practiced motion, not splashing, not rushing. The water glows for a moment, then dims. A cloth is soaked, ringed, folded. You are led to the seat. It is stone, padded with linen, shaped to your form. You sit. You place your hands on your knees. You close your eyes. The cloth touches your shoulder first. Warm. Almost too warm. Then perfect. She presses. Not rubs. Not scrubs. Just presses. Shoulder. Neck. Collarbone. Chest. Each area a pause. Each movement slow enough that the skin has time to understand it is being seen. She moves in silence. He passes her the next cloth. Cooler. Infused with rosemary. You smell it before it touches you. Then it arrives, the sharpness of green, the memory of open hills, the hint of something alive. She drags the cloth across your arms, from shoulder to wrist, as if unwrapping you from yourself. Nothing is spoken, not because there is nothing to say, but because language would be a reduction. The oil comes next. She does not ask which kind. She knows. A thick one today, pressed 2 weeks ago, stored in ceramic, heated by touch alone. She rubs it between her palms before it meets your skin, and when it does, your body remembers what it is to be soft. She oils you as if reading. Each limb, each line, each tendon. Not as parts, but as story. The elbow is a comma. The knee a hinge. The back a long, unfolding sentence. You breathe through your nose. You do not sigh. Not yet. He brings the strigil. Polished bronze. No inscription. No fletish. Only a tool. And yet, it holds more intimacy than any ornament. She begins at your neck, draws it down slowly. Oil, dead skin, time, all gathered in a quiet line and wiped away. You hear it more than you feel it. The scrape, the drag, the breath of bronze against oil. Each stroke is deliberate. Each pause, sacred. You feel yourself arriving, not into the world, but into yourself. Your hands are scraped last, then your legs. She does not rush. The room is warm, but not hot. The windows are closed, but not sealed. A draft moves through the upper arch, brushing the curtain. Somewhere in another room, a servant sets down a tray. You hear the soft click of ceramic on marble. You wonder if it is for you. Then forget. She rinses you again. Not to clean, to complete. The final cloth is dry. It moves across your shoulders like memory. Then your back. Then the soles of your feet. When it is done, she steps back. No nod. No declaration. Only stillness. You open your eyes. He holds out the robe. It is not the same one. This one smells of cedar. You step into it. You do not tie it. He does. The belt slides around your waist like quiet affirmation. You are finished. Not changed. Not improved. Just rejoined. You sit once more. A tray is brought. Warm milk with honey. 3 olives. A piece of soft bread. You eat slowly. Not because you are hungry, but because the ritual is not complete until the body is reminded of sweetness. She bows. He does not. They leave. You remain. The brazier cracks once. A curl of smoke climbs. You press your palms together. You close your eyes again. And the quiet of being washed, not washing, settles into your bones like heat. Not all water is for scrubbing. Some is for remembering. There are mornings when the world seems to carry itself with a kind of silence so dense and slow that even the passing of a cart sounds like a whisper, muffled not by distance, but by the heavy press of heat already rising from the stones. And on such mornings, and this is one of them, you notice the change in air not as a breeze or a wind or even a movement, but as a pressure, as a thickening, as if the very breath of the city has deepened, grown warmer, heavier, and begun to settle into your skin before you've even stepped beyond the shadowed mouth of your doorway. And yet you step forward because this is Rome, and the day does not wait for any one man's comfort, And because in truth you are not separate from the weight that is beginning to gather in the square and in the forum and in the alleyways where sandals scrape and murmurs rise. And so you take the stone steps slowly, one after the other, feeling each edge beneath your soles. Their warmth already waking up beneath the pressure of morning light and human feet. And you join the city not like a guest, but like a particle returning to the substance it came from. The forum is not yet full, but it is no longer empty either. Bodies are forming clusters like droplets on glass, slowly growing toward one another, coagulating into corners and under arches. And with them comes the scent, that slow and enveloping presence that is not a smell in the usual sense, not something you would name or bottle, but something closer to a language spoken through the skin. A mixture of oil and fatigue, and crushed olives and breath, and wine that has dried into tunics, and the faint, constant aroma of warm dust settling onto hair and shoulders and beards as if the sun itself were pouring it down like flour. You do not flinch, because to flinch would be to admit something foreign is touching you. And in this city, there is nothing foreign about the heat of another person, or the slick film of sweat glistening on a stranger's neck, or the musky imprint of sleeplessness and boiled beans, and will unwash for a week. These are not intrusions. They are markers. They are how you know where you are and who stands beside you. And you do not recoil from them because they are not filth, they are evidence. You move slowly now, not because you are in pain or weary, but because every step in the crowd must be a negotiation. Not a demand for space, but a conversation, where your shoulder speaks to another's back, where your elbow makes an argument with a tunic, where your scent adds its chapter to the ongoing scroll of presence that unrolls across the forum each morning, curling upward in invisible smoke above the heads of men who speak loudly about law and war, but carry the quiet truth of their bodies in the folds of their clothes and the sheen on their temples. It is not that the people here are dirty. No, that word belongs to judgment, to distance, to those who have forgotten that even the most perfumed senator carries in the creases of his neck the memory of dust. It is that they are here entirely, completely, physically, without denial or disguise. And to walk among them is to accept that the self is porous, that the body is an organ of exchange, and that cleanliness, however fleeting and sacred, is a kind of solitude that cannot be maintained in the presence of others. You close your eyes, not to block out the world, but to allow it in, to receive it not through sight, but through skin and breath and the taste of heat rising from the lips of the man next to you, whose name you do not know, but whose rhythm of standing, of shifting, of sighing, has already become part of the rhythm of your own muscles, as if the forum were not a place, but a single body formed of many, sweating, breathing, humming beneath the sun like a sleeping beast. There is a boy beside the column, no older than 12, who wipes his hands on the same cloth he used for his face, and then drinks from a cup he borrowed from a vendor, and then licks his lips as if nothing in that sequence were strange or worth remarking on. Because here, in this place, in this heat, among these people, the boundaries between clean and unclean are not drawn with soap, but with context, with silence, with the quiet understanding that water is rare and time is short, and sweat is simply the skin's way of remembering the sun. A woman passes with a basket. You do not look directly, but you smell her before you see her. Not perfume in the decorative sense, but something deliberate, something sharp and acidic and floral all at once, like vinegar left in a clay jar beside petals, meant not to invite, but to guard, to mark territory, to remind anyone who comes near that this body is not part of the crowd, not to be merged with, not to be inhaled without consequence. The scent slices through the air like a knife through warm bread, and you find yourself momentarily returned to the memory of the baths, to that moment when the oil was first poured, warm and fragrant and slow, onto your shoulders, and you felt the weight of yourself returning to you after a day spent dissolving in the noise of the world. And you realize now that what you miss is not the cleanliness itself, but the singularity, the solitude, the way your scent belonged only to you for a brief time. But now it does not. Now it has mingled. Now you're no longer one, but many. And though there's a kind of loss in that, there's also comfort. Because in this place, no one is clean for long, and no one expects to be. And the true act of purification is not in the absence of dirt, but in the presence of others, and standing shoulder to shoulder with 1,000 different bodies, and knowing that yours too contributes to the warmth that makes the stones sweat, to the breath that makes the air move, to the scent that tells the gods above that Rome is still here, still breathing, still sweating, still sacred. There are places where the body forgets what it once feared, where discomfort becomes ritual, and where cleanliness is not an ideal but a memory, one so distant it begins to seem like myth, like the recollection of a soft hand once brushing across your neck in another life, in another world before the mud and the blood and the days that blur like smoke rising from wet grass. In that place, that realm of forgotten comforts and hardened breath, is the military frontier of Rome. You do not wake with the sun here. You wake with the cold, not because it wants you, but because it will not wait. The earth is hard. The wool is damp. Your limbs are stiff, not from age, but from sleep that folds itself like a cramped note inside your joints and muscles, pressed into the creases of your knees and elbows by the relentless hands of damp wind and unfinished dreams. You do not bathe in the frontier. You scrape. You do not cleanse. You endure. There's water, yes, in the barrels in the river nearby, sometimes falling from the sky. But water is not luxury here. It is danger. It is coldness. It is weakness. To undress fully, to wet the skin without cause, is to invite illness, to gamble warmth for vanity. And so, you do not strip. You do not scrub. You live in layers, in sweat, in the salt of your own survival. And your comrades do the same. And so no one is clean, and no one is alone in that. The scent of men here is not offensive. It is armor. The mixture of leather and iron and dried meat and feet kept in sandals for days on end is more than a smell. It is a boundary, a signal, a declaration to the wind itself. We are not soft. We are not fresh. We are not the men who sit on marble benches and speak of bathing as if it were a civic duty or a social performance. You remember those days, faintly, the tile walls, the warm pools, the press of skin against skin in the steam, the scraping of strigils and the soft laughter of men who had never known what it meant to dig your own latrine with frozen fingers or to sleep with your sword within arm's reach, because the wolves did not always wait for the scouts. Here, dirt is not filth. Dirt is proof that you have marched, that you have dug, that you have stood in rain and sun and frost without breaking. The grime beneath your nails is not shameful. It is the ink in which your loyalty is written. Your sweat is not washed away. It dries, it reappears, it thickens, it blends with dust, and eventually it becomes you. Your comrades do not notice, because they too carry the same sediment of purpose, the same weight of unwashed days and unwiped blood and smoke from fires that never fully warmed the bones. There are attempts, of course, now and then, a splash of cold water from a helmet, a shirt beaten against a rock, a rag passed behind the ears. But these are not baths. They are not for transformation. They are for reassurance that the body, though covered, though crusted, though hardened like the soles of your feet, is still yours. That beneath the grime, beneath the calluses, there still exists a man who once shaved before breakfast, who once anointed his wrists with oil, who once walked the long corridor of a therme in silence, listening to the echo of his own breath bouncing from stone to stone. You do not miss it. Not exactly. But sometimes, in the hours before dawn, when the fire is only embers and the stars are brittle with cold, you think of steam, of how it rose around your face, how it wrapped your skin like something kind, how it blurred the edge between your body and the air. And then someone coughs, and then the watch changes, and then a cry goes up from the next post, and the memory slips away like soap across wet stone, fast, slippery, gone. You rise. You do not stretch. You move as you are, stiff, armored, silent. Your breath smells like leather. Your hands smell like smoke. Your feet smell like the road. But none of this is shameful. This is not the absence of hygiene. This is the presence of devotion. Because here, to be unclean is to be committed. And when the enemy comes, and he will not smell lavender. He will smell you, and he will know you are not from the city. You are from the line, and the line does not wash. The line holds. The line bleeds. The line stinks, and the line survives. Long before the first shout of the baker broke the morning silence, and before the clatter of bronze against marble signaled the opening of the atrium doors, there were hands already at work in the dim corner of a narrow street where no breeze ever reached fully and the sunlight arrived slowly, filtered through linen draped across balconies like tired flags. And in this still, half-asleep city, where even the crows had not yet decided to begin their complaints, there sat a man with a knife not meant for killing and a bowl not meant for food, a man whose work was not recorded in law nor glorified in mosaic, but whose fingers held the faces of senators and beggars alike. The tonsure was always awake before his clients, not because he loved the stillness, though he did, or because he wished to prepare, though he must, but because in that hour, before any voice but his own had spoken, the room, if it could be called that, for it was no more than a stall between two crumbling walls with a stool and a basin and a jar of oil, belonged entirely to him, and he could move through it without explanation, sharpening the blade with slow, affectionate scrapes against the leather strap nailed into the stone, warming the water by breath alone, arranging the cloths folded by habit, not preference, all while listening to the city think. His clients arrived like the tide, not all at once, never on time, but always in rhythm. And when they came, they brought with them more than hair, more than beards in need of shaping or stubble in need of scraping. They brought the remnants of the night before, the wine not yet sweat out of their skin, the arguments half mumbled in sleep, the woman they had not told their wives about, the joke they had rehearsed but not dared to say aloud, the debt they hoped the other man had forgotten, and it was all there in the way they sat, in the way their eyes darted before closing in. The tension of the jaw before the blade ever touched them, and so the tonsure listened, not because he cared, though perhaps he did, not because he judged, though perhaps he couldn't help it, but because it was the only thing he had left to do, while scraping the neck of a man who might own 5 slaves and the deeds to 3 vineyards, but who, for a few minutes, was as still and as vulnerable as a lamb caught in a shepherd's crook. The shaving was slow, not because the blade was dull, but because speed was the enemy of both beauty and safety, and in this city, where a single nick could ruin a morning and a poor shave could humiliate a man before the magistrates. There was value in slowness, in ritual, in the predictable rhythm of cloth wet hand blade oil hand again, in the soft whistling of the nostrils as the client tried not to move. Tried not to think about the thin edge resting under his chin, the tonsur's breath. Warm against his cheek like something both paternal and criminal. There was soap, but not the kind one might find in the baths of the wealthy. This was a mixture he made himself, bitter and herbal, with ashes and lime and something sharp that made the eyes sting. And when it was rubbed into the face, it was not gentle, it was not kind, it was a preparation, a call to endure, because even here in this small ceremony of appearance, there was discomfort, and discomfort was part of becoming presentable. He scraped. He did not wipe. He moved the blade in short, firm strokes, not dragging, never pausing too long, never losing the angle. And when he flicked the foam away with his thumb, the face beneath it looked newer, less tired, more dangerous. As if in removing the hair, he had revealed not youth, but potential. And all the while they spoke, or they didn't. But whether their lips moved or not, the tonsure always heard something. The hesitation before a name was given, the stiffness in the throat when asked about the Senate, the tremble in the laugh when they spoke of wives or coins or gods. And though he rarely responded with more than a grunt or a nod or a soft hum that might mean anything, the men always left feeling they had confessed something, even if only to themselves, even if only in silence. Some paid well, some paid late, some didn't pay at all, but brought news or favors or warnings. There will be raids in the north. The baker's daughter is with child. The merchant is lying about the grain. The aqueduct is cracked again. And the tonsure took it all in, stored it behind his eyes like clippings swept into a single pile, not to wield, but to know. And at the end of the day, when the bowl was emptied and the blade wiped clean and the stool leaned against the wall as if asleep, the tonsure would sit for a moment, elbows on knees, hands hanging loose like broken ropes, and he would think not of the faces he had held, but of the smells, sweat and wine and oil and garlic and fear, and he would wonder if, in scraping them clean, he had absorbed some part of them into his own fingers. And he would wash, finally, but only his hands, never his ears, because in Rome, a man could be poor in coin and still rich in what he remembered. And the tonsure remembered everything. You do not wake all at once, not like those who rise with purpose or alarm, not like soldiers startled by horns or merchants jolted by bells, but rather like something submerged beginning to remember breath, like an ancient amphora long buried beneath layers of dust and straw being uncovered inch by hands that move not with haste, but with quiet reverence, with fingertips that brush instead of grasping, with a kind of patience known only to those who understand that time, uncertain. Ours does not flow forward, but instead pools slowly in the corners of rooms where no one watches. And so your consciousness unfolds not like a curtain yanked aside, but like smoke easing its way through a lattice screen, shapeless, soft, patient, almost unwilling, a rising that carries no sound, no intention, only sensation, only the gentle press of absence beginning to loosen. You do not open your eyes, not because you are resisting the day, though perhaps you are, and not because the sleep was deep, though it wasn't, but because the thin warmth that rests above your cheekbones, the fragile heat that still lingers between your ribs and the woven blanket, is something you have not earned and therefore do not wish to disturb. Not just yet, because there are few things in this world more sacred than the moment between breath and responsibility, between the internal rhythm of sleep and the external demands of performance. And so you lie there, not out of laziness or reluctance, but out of respect, because this moment is not the beginning of a task, but the end of a forgetting, and endings, even gentle ones, should be mourned. The blanket does not cover you fully, but it covers enough. Enough to keep the cool breath of the world at bay. Enough to remind your skin that there is still softness in this house, however worn, however borrowed. And beneath that cloth, your body exists not as something that must be shown or judged or tended, but simply as presence, as weight, as a set of boundaries drawn loosely in linen, barely touched by light, as if the shape of you were still being negotiated by the dawn itself. Still tentative, still open to revision. Somewhere beyond the wall, thin, cracked, unpainted, someone moves. You cannot tell who, but you know the sound. The careful lift of a jug, the faint creak of a leather strap, the slow scrape of a toe finding the edge of a sandal. All the noises of a house awakening without wanting to disturb its own silence, as if even its oldest timbers understood that morning, like a new guest, must be welcomed slowly. And so you listen, not because you are curious, but because the act of listening makes the stillness within you feel more deliberate, more structured, more sacred, as if by tuning your ears to the world, you are also tuning yourself, drawing your edges inward, aligning your heart with the slow gravity of the day. You shift, only slightly. A knee bends, a foot slides forward beneath the blanket, the neck lengthens, and with that motion comes awareness. Not the bright, sharp kind that arrives with sunlight through open shutters, but the slow, reluctant recognition of limbs, of joints that have stiffened slightly overnight, of the dull hum of blood remembering how to move, of muscles that ache not from effort, but from containment. As though the body, left to lie too long in silence, begins to protest not the rest, but the restraint. And now, finally, your eyes open. Not wide, not all at once. Just enough to see shadow. Just enough to feel the shift in light as something distinct, as something not you. Just enough to see your own arm resting across your chest, still soft with sleep, still creased from the texture of the fabric beneath it, still human in that unpresented way that only exists before mirrors and clothing and names return. And in that arm you see the story of the night. Not what you dreamed, which you cannot remember, but that you dreamed it all, that your flesh was unguarded, that time passed without measurement, that you lived, however briefly, without being observed. The ceiling is familiar, not because it is beautiful, it isn't, and not because you have studied it, you haven't, but because it is always there, waiting like a silent partner in this slow return from absence. And as your gaze lingers on the tiny cracks in the plaster, on the discoloration near the corner where rain once whispered its way through the roof, on the single strand of cobweb, swaying gently in a draft you cannot yet feel, you begin to understand that waking is not an act of arrival, but an act of surrender. Surrendering not to the world, but to its shape, its noise, its demands, all of which you have briefly forgotten, and all of which are now preparing to reattach themselves to your body like garments still warm from yesterday. You sit, not upright, not fully, more of a lean, a gesture of intention rather than action, your elbows finding your thighs, your hands curling loosely, your head hanging forward like fruit on a tired branch. And in that position, suspended between rest and readiness, you breathe, not with effort, not with purpose, but as a kind of reacquaintance, as if your lungs were greeting your ribs, as if your breath were tapping gently on the inside of your chest to ask, "Is it time? Are you here again? Shall we begin?" And then at last, you move. A foot touches the floor, hesitant, uncertain, as if the coolness of the tile might rebuke you for forgetting it. And then the other joins, and now you're no longer lying, but not yet standing, and the floor holds you the way an old friend might. Not eagerly, but consistently, reminding you that gravity, at least, has not changed while you slept. The basin is where you left it. Of course it is. Simple clay, chipped at the edge from some forgotten moment, half filled with water that is no longer cold, but also not warm, just tepid enough to feel indecisive, just still enough to reflect not your face, but the shape of the window behind you. And as you lean forward, you do not see yourself, not yet, not clearly, but you feel the shadow of your form hovering above the surface like a thought not fully formed. You dip the cloth. The water kisses your knuckles. And for a moment, just a breath, just a flicker, it feels like forgiveness. You lift the cloth to your face. And now the ritual begins. You did not plan to leave the house, not yet, not so early. Not while the morning still curled its fingers around the corners of your room like a sleeping cat that has not yet decided whether to rise or to vanish. Not while the city outside still whispered instead of spoke. Not while the sky, that pale and careless canvas above all roofs, remained the color of linen soaked and wrung and forgotten in a basin too shallow to cleanse anything but guilt. And yet your feet moved, not because they were told to, not because the path called to them, but because some part of you deeper than thought and older than instruction remembered the pull of stone against heel, the way the ground could carry you if you simply allowed it. And so you dressed, slowly, not out of indecision, but out of reverence, for there is a certain tenderness in choosing the tunic that doesn't itch, in folding the belt once more with the precision of someone who knows his own waist better than his own name, in brushing the shoulder with the heel of a palm, not to clean, but to settle, to center, to say, I am here again, and as the cloth drew itself across your chest and gathered beneath your ribs, you felt not clothed, but remembered, as if the fabric itself recalled. Your shape and returned to it not as burden, but as agreement. The sandals were cold. They always were. You sat on the edge of the stool and let your fingers fumble with the worn leather as they always did. Each loop familiar, each strap already shaped to your foot. And as you bent forward, elbows pressing into your thighs, breath held between lips, you became aware, again, of your spine, of the stretch across your shoulder blades, of the simple, aching truth that you were still made of bones, that you were still, despite the silence of the night, the labor of days, and the whisper of age, someone held together by the same thin tendons and tired intentions that had brought you this far. The door opened without a sound, or perhaps it did make a sound, but your ears were not listening for it. They were listening instead to the wind as it passed across the lip of the alley, to the faint complaint of a bird uncertain whether the day had earned its song, to the soft percussion of footsteps far away and growing closer, or perhaps retreating, because in this light, in this hour, distance is not a matter of measurement, but of meaning. You stepped outside, and Rome greeted you not like a friend, not like a foe, but like something vast and indifferent and eternal. A place that would remain whether you walked its stones or vanished into its dust. A city whose breath was made not of air, but of ash and oil and smoke and sweat, and all the words ever spoken within its walls. Words now ground down into the powder that rose with each footfall, clinging to calves, to hems, to the folds of your knees where the fabric met skin like history pressing itself back in a body from which it once emerged. The dust was everywhere. It lived not just beneath your sandals, but within your pores. It was not dirt, not quite. It was memory, reduced. It was law forgotten. It was the echo of hooves, and the laughter of soldiers and the cough of old women and the scrape of clay amphory against stone thresholds and the whisper of things never meant to be said aloud. All of it settled now in the hollow behind your ear, in the crease where your thumb met your palm, in the space between your lips and your teeth where words might rise later in the day if the need for speaking ever outweighs the comfort of silence. You walked, not to arrive, not to be seen, but to move, because the city, like the blood within you, demanded motion. Not the kind that rushed, but the kind that lingered, that looped back on itself, that circled the same fountain again and again, not to admire it, but to reassure itself that it still existed, that it had not crumbled overnight, that the water still flowed, that the stones still wept beneath its moss, that even beauty forgotten was still beauty, and even ruin in sunlight was still honest. And so your feet found the familiar path, the same path they always found. Not because it was easiest, but because it was known. Past the man with the basket of figs who never looked up. Past the shutters that always opened halfway, as if the house itself were undecided. Past the doorway with the crack in the lintel that resembled, if you squinted, the outline of a sleeping dog. Past the corner where you once saw two boys fighting over a coin neither would spend. And then, without surprise, without thought, without the need to ask, you reached the baths. You had not meant to, but your body had, because the body, unlike the mind, remembers comfort, remembers warmth, remembers water, and above all, remembers cleanliness, not as vanity, not even as health, but as a form of return, a ritual not of removal, but of restoration, a way to remind yourself that beneath the dust and the bruises and the thickening calluses, you are still flesh, still soft, still capable of being touched without harm. You stood there, not entering, not hesitating, just standing, and in the marble shadow of the entrance, with the first whispers of steam curling upward like incense from the hidden pools within, you close your eyes, not to rest, not to pray, but to prepare, not for bathing, but for shedding. Not just clothes, but stories, not just sweat, but yesterday. And only then, only with a breath that tasted faintly of time and heat and expectation, did you step across the threshold and disappear. You wake not because the night has ended, and not because the day has truly begun, but because something in the balance has shifted, not sharply, not with any finality, but like a door that was never fully closed, creaking just slightly in its frame, letting in not wind or light, but the memory of movement, a whisper that dances behind your eyes before your eyes even open. And as you lie there, still stretched between sleep and self, you realize you are not being called but invited, not summoned but nudged, as if the very air around you has grown aware of your presence again and is gently asking, are you ready to return? And you are not truly, not yet, because there is warmth still beneath your ribs and softness still in the joints of your fingers and the room around you. This quiet, familiar room with its worn edges and patient walls has not yet made a demand of you, not yet insisted on your participation, and so you remain as you are, horizontal and half-formed, a body breathing beneath linen that smells faintly of oil and clay and whatever else has passed through these nights before, a body still unclaimed by mirrors or voices, by labor or ritual, a body still allowed to be simply a body, untouched by the weight of definition. You shift slightly, not a decision, but a drift, and the fabric slides down your shoulder, and the air kisses your skin with that peculiar chill that belongs only to early hours, the kind of chill that carries no threat, but still reminds you that outside this bed, outside this moment, There's a world of stone and shadow and sound that will eventually require your participation, your posture, your reply. But not yet. Not here. Not in this breathing silence that thickens like steam. Instead, you inhale slowly, as if the breath were something to be earned. And you let it linger behind your sternum. Let it fill the hollow places you forgot you had. And when you exhale, the room exhales with you. The walls easing just slightly. The light behind the curtain adjusting its shape. The wood beneath your bed remembering your weight and forgiving you for it. Your eyes open, but not fully, and they do not seek to see. They open like a curtain opens to let in the scent of rain, not to study the world, but to confirm it still exists. And what you see is not a ceiling, but a sky painted in plaster and shadow. Not light, but suggestion. And what you feel, truly feel, is that the day has begun in the same way a drop begins to fall. Silently, imperceptibly, with a tension you can only sense, not name. You sit, not upright, not all at once, but with the kind of motion that belongs to water shifting in a jar. Slow and complete and inevitable. And your hands find your knees not as anchors but as acknowledgments, and the weight of your body becomes known to you again. Not burdensome, not regrettable, simply real. The mass of you, the shape of you, the ache in the breath and the gravity of being contained in skin once more. The floor is cool, the air cooler, and somewhere beyond the wooden door, a drop falls. You hear it. You do not know where it landed or what it landed on, but you know the sound, not the splash, but the idea of the splash, the softness of it, the surrender of water to surface, and suddenly your mind is filled not with thoughts, but with textures. Smooth clay, damp linen, cracked stone, the slippery edge of soap pressed in your palm by another hand long ago, the scent of rosemary steeping in heat. The hush of water as it parts around your shins. You have not yet washed today. You have not even risen, but already the memory of bathing moves through you like a ghost. Not the action, the feeling. The feeling of clean skin kissed by wind, of wet footprints fading behind you, of hands dragging oil across shoulder blades not to polish, but to soothe, of silence, of steam, of solitude shared with strangers whose names you never knew, but whose presence carved shape into the mist, whose breathing became part of your own rhythm as you sank into the caldarium and let the heat unmake you. You rise, because the memory demands it, because your body, still wrapped in the residue of sleep, has begun to crave not movement, but shedding, not activity, but release. And so you rise, and as your feet touch the floor, you're no longer someone simply waking, but someone preparing to dissolve, to be reassembled in water, to be rewritten in warmth. The robe is where it always is, folded with care, faded from sun, holding its own silence. And as you wrap it around your waist, the cloth sighs against your back, and the knot you tie is not tight, but certain. The knot of someone who does not need to own the day, only survive it, only pass through it clean enough to feel real, clean enough to be seen without armor. The door opens. The corridor yawns like a lung, and you step into it, not as a man with a task, but as a vessel seeking to be emptied, not because he is full, but because he remembers what it means to feel hollow in the right way. The sacred way, the restful way, the way that allows the world to pour into you only what is needed, no more. And from the first footfall to the last, as you move toward the water, you count not the steps, but the silences between them. Each one longer, each one deeper, each one a reminder that cleanliness in this city, in this life, is not the absence of filth, is the presence of pause. And you're learning slowly, again and again, to pause, to listen, To bathe. To begin. You do not remember falling asleep. There was no moment that felt like a final breath. No line drawn between thought and forgetting. No clear border where the self dissolved into the dark and let the night take its place. Only the long, slow sinking, the kind of descent that feels more like returning than vanishing, like the soft curl of a petal folding inward, not from fear, not from fatigue, but from the simple, sacred knowledge that to close is sometimes to preserve, to protect, to prepare. And now, without alarm, without interruption, you rise again. Not like a man summoned, not like a citizen restored to duty, but like a word slowly recalled after a long silence, like the trace of perfume still clinging to an empty garment, like something that has never truly left, only waited to be noticed again. The air is different today, not cold, not warm, not sharp, but filled, heavy, not with weight, but with scent, a scent you cannot name at first, only feel. Something herbal, something bitter, something alive and crushed and carried, as though someone somewhere nearby had opened a jar of dried bay leaves and scattered them across the morning simply to remind the world it could still smell, still awaken, still carry memory not in thought, but in nostril, in breath, in the deep cavities behind the eyes where memory lives when it forgets to use words. You remain lying, eyes open but unfocused, staring not at the ceiling but through it, or beyond it, or within it, as if the plaster held more than just cracks, more than just the faint shadows of dust gathering in the corners, as if it held stories too old to be told aloud, stories whispered from brick to beam to skin, stories that seep slowly downward and find you, still and waiting on your back, breathing their fragments without knowing their shape. You shift, slightly, not to leave the bed, not yet, but to reorient yourself to gravity, to remind the body that it belongs to the ground, to the day, to the slow press of time against flesh. And your hip touches the mattress in a way that tells you, yes, you are still here, still real, still inhabiting this narrow envelope of softness and skin and half-shed dreams. The fabric beneath your shoulder is damp. You don't know why. Perhaps sweat. Perhaps condensation from the breath you didn't realize had deepened in the final hours before waking, when the body begins its own quiet rituals of readiness, when the lungs slow their panic and the heart shift from protection to preparation. You breathe in again, and now you know the scent. It is not bay leaf, not only. It is oil, pressed, infused, mixed. A blend, perhaps, of myrtle and thyme, something once rubbed across a lover's shoulder, something once poured into a lamp before a gathering, something once found in the folds of a borrowed towel and remembered not for its name, but for the way it made you feel clean even before you touched the water. It is not coming from your room. That much is certain. It is drifting, carried, which means the baths are preparing, which means others are already moving, which means the world has resumed its rhythm without you, but gently, without insistence, offering you the chance to join it not with urgency, but with grace. You sit, and the sound that escapes your mouth is not a groan, not a sigh, but something older, a release of breath that has been waiting all night to be noticed, the kind of exhale that feels like the body lowering a burden it has carried even in sleep, the kind of sound that means I am still here even if no one else is listening. Your feet find a floor like roots finding soil they've missed, and you rise, not with effort, not with pride, but with permission. Permission granted not by the hour or the calendar or the obligations you've set aside, but by your knees, your shoulders, your own breath returning to its pace without fear. And still, As you wrap the same robe, the same belt, the same unhurried touch of cloth against collarbone, the scent lingers. Stronger now, closer, as though someone has passed beneath your window holding a clay jar, as though the air itself has decided to bathe, and you, by stepping into it, are already halfway washed. The corridor greets you not with sound, but with echo, not with light, but with outline. And you walk it slowly, barefoot still, so that each footstep becomes its own thought, its own arrival, its own soft ceremony. And by the time you reach the atrium where the light begins to pool like milk at the base of a bowl, you have forgotten your name, forgotten the shape of your plans, forgotten even the reason you came, and remember only this, that there is water waiting, and steam, and oil, and stone, and silence made thick enough to carry you. And so you go, toward it, not with speed, not with need, but with the certainty of someone who knows that even if nothing changes, the ritual is enough. The ritual is always enough. You do not rise quickly, not this time, not now that the body is grown too accustomed to the rhythm of warmth and breath and stillness. Not now that the mind has learned to stretch itself across the hours of sleep like parchment left to dry beneath a pale sun. Fragile, slow, curling slightly at the corners, reluctant to be gathered. And so you remain just a little longer, not because you're tired, though perhaps you are, but because departure from the quiet of the bed would mean relinquishing the invisible conversation still unfolding between the back of your neck and the cool air, between your fingers curled in the folds of the linen, and the light that grows by degrees, that does not break but drips like melted wax from one shadow to the next. The room is quieter than yesterday, not silent, never silent, but quieter. The kind of quiet that only arrives when the city beyond your walls has not yet fully remembered itself, when the courtyards are still holding their breath, and the doorways have not yet begun to frame arguments or deliveries or greetings too loud to be sincere, when even the birds, those small, frantic guardians of morning, hesitate in the branches before song. And in this quiet, this deliberate, breathing stillness, you do not feel alone. Not in the way that aches. Not in the way that presses its cold hand against the center of the ribs. But in the way that makes solitude feel earned, like an empty bowl set down with care beside a stream, waiting not out of need, but out of trust. And as your eyes remain half-lidded, not focused, not searching, you begin to feel, rather than think, the weight of the stone beneath the house, the stone beneath the city, the stone beneath you. The same stone that bore the aqueducts and the temples and the roads. The same stone shaped by tools now buried, by hands long gone, but whose marks remain, whose intention endures. And so you rise, not to rush toward purpose, but to align yourself with something slower, something older, something that does not begin when you open the door, but has always been there, beneath the sandals, beneath the mosaics, beneath the heels of senators and slaves alike. A presence too large to be spoken of and too patient to demand anything other than your quiet acknowledgement. The robe you reach for is not yours, not exactly. It is the same one you always wear, yes, same fabric, same color faded from blue to dust, same threadbare cuff worn loose from years of small, unconscious tugs at the wrist. But as your arms slide through its sleeves today, as the collar brushes the notch between your collarbones, it feels borrowed in a new way, as if belonging not to you, but to a version of yourself that existed only in the minds of others, a man who rises early, who bathes with dignity, who knows the names of herbs and stones, and can name the time of day by the quality of light that filters through the steam. You're not that man, but this morning You choose to step into the shape of him. And so you move through the door, through the corridor, past the wall where the plaster peels like old bark, past the niche where someone once left a broken lamp. Not for repair, but for memory, past the clay jug left out too long, and now cradling only dust and echoes. And you descend the steps not as a man seeking water, but as one returning to a ritual. And the difference, though small, makes each footfall feel more deliberate, more sacred. The baths are nearly empty. And that is perfect, because today, what you need is not the noise of shared cleansing, not the distraction of conversations echoing off marble, not the presence of bodies wrapped in towels and smoke, but the sound of your own feet against wet stone, the hush of your own breath as it lengthens to match the rhythm of dripping water, the quiet splash of your own fingers testing the temperature of a basin still steaming slightly from the last soul to pass through. You step onto the tiles with care, not out of fear of slipping, but because the floor itself is worth honoring, smoothed not just by tools and craftsmen and years, but by the countless bare feet of men and boys and elders and strangers who walked this same path with oil on their skin and tiredness in their shoulders, who sought not beauty, not even cleanliness, but the soft relief that comes when heat draws pain upward and out and leaves behind only silence. You kneel at the edge of the basin. You do not splash. You do not plunge. You do not perform. You kneel. And with the palm of your hand, you gather a small pool of water and lift it slowly. Not to wash, not yet, but to observe. And in the curve of that small body of water, trembling in your hand, you see more than just your face. You see the ceiling's arches bent and distorted. You see the line of your robe dark with steam. You see time in its most fluid form, made visible and temporary and pure. Then with the cloth you begin. Neck, shoulder, bicep, belly, each touch deliberate, each pass of fabric against skin not a removal, but a remembering that this body, too, was shaped like stone, like clay, by intention and force and care, and that the dust upon it is not failure, but history, and that to wipe it away is not to erase, but to begin again, not as someone new, but as someone reclaimed. You linger, longer than usual, not because there is more to wash, but because in the sound of the dripping, the echoing, endless dripping from the copper spout to the basin's edge, you hear something more profound than instruction, more ancient than rule, more beautiful than praise. You hear rhythm. You hear ritual. You hear Rome. There's a kind of mourning that does not so much arrive as it does swell. Not like music, not like a wave, but like the slow lifting of mist from the surface of something ancient and still, the way a breath lingers on glass before fading, the way the outline of a familiar object reasserts itself after a long absence, not with drama, but with the quiet certainty of return. And this morning, though not cold, though not bright, though not in any way remarkable to the eyes or ears, moves through you like a thought that has always been there, just beneath language, waiting for you to slow down long enough to hear it again. You do not open your eyes immediately, nor do you shift, nor roll, nor stretch, because all those movements imply a kind of separation, a kind of transition from one state to another. And what you feel now, in the stillness between your ribs, in the cradle of your hips pressed into the softened straw of your bedding, is not a desire to change, but to remain suspended, whole, untouched by interruption, as though your body is not waking at all, but remembering how to be quiet inside itself. The room around you has become more than a room. It is no longer just the sum of its walls and corners and objects arranged with the kind of care that only emerges when one lives slowly. No, it has become a second skin, a container not for possessions but for presence. And as you breathe in the faint scent of cool stone and last night's lamp oil and whatever trace of wind has crept through the high, narrow window, you feel, not think, that to leave this space would not be to step outside, but to step away from yourself. And yet, something stirs. Not urgency, never urgency, but a pulse. Subtle, low, like the pressure of a thumb against the inside of your wrist, like the memory of a hand that once held yours in silence. And that pulse, that invisible rhythm, tells you without speaking that the water is waiting again. And though it waits without judgment, without clock, without expectation, it still waits with purpose. And that purpose, however vague, however ancient, however unspoken, is yours. You rise. Not all at once. Not like a blade drawn from sheath, but like smoke uncurling from the edge of a brazier, like steam loosening itself from the surface of a darkened pool. And as your feet touch the worn stone floor, smooth not from polish but from time itself, you feel with sudden clarity how many other feet have stepped here, how many other bodies have passed through this same invisible veil between sleep and intention, how many hands have pulled this same rope from its hook, how many backs have bent toward the same doorframe. And in that awareness, there is comfort, not loss. The comfort of belonging not to a name, not to a story, but to a ritual so old that even forgetting it becomes part of remembering. And so, robed and slow, you step once more through the hush of the corridor, past the lone niches where oil lamps once burned brighter than ambition, past the curtain that does not flutter today, because there is no wind, only the gentle press of time moving sideways like a river refusing to rush. And when you reach the threshold of the baths, you do not enter immediately, because even here, even now, there is a need to pause. Not to prepare, but to align, to allow the heart to match its beat to the rhythm of the space you are about to inhabit. The slope of the stone is correct. The water should be lower, but it is not. It is brimming without sound, without source, without logic. And you do not question it, because this place has never answered questions, only absorbed them. And in this moment, the question becomes irrelevant, because the sight of the water, unbroken, waiting, perfect in its tension, speaks to something deeper than curiosity. It speaks to reverence. You kneel, not because you are commanded, but because the knees themselves know what to do. You touch the surface, and it does not ripple. You press your palm into the warmth, and it does not resist. You lift a handful to your face, and it carries no scent. And yet, as the water passes over your cheeks,